Welcome to Unwrap Reality, where we narrate stories on things that happen in real life.
Jake Reaper Rivera, a retired Marine with PTSD, had spent years mastering the art of silence, not as an absence of sound, but as a shield against the chaos that once defined his life. After 2 decades of service, including tours and war zones where every noise could mean life or death, he craved peace. He found it in a secluded cabin nestled deep in the Colorado woods. The property was raw and untamed, much like Jake himself, but it held promise. With military precision, he transformed the space into a sanctuary, installing soundproof windows, acoustic panels, and a white noise system that hummed softly, masking the outside world. For the first time in years, Jake felt like he could breathe. But solitude wasn't just about escaping noise, it was about reclaiming control. Every nail he hammered, every panel he secured, was a step toward healing. His German Shepherd, Rex, trained to detect danger during their deployment days, now served as both companion and sentinel. Together they built a rhythm. Mornings spent hiking through pine-scented trails, afternoons tinkering with soundproofing projects, and evenings watching the sunset from the porch. It wasn't perfect, nightmares still visited, but it was enough. Or so Jake thought, until the day Karen Wexler decided his quiet was her problem. Karen Wexler wasn't just the HOA president. She was its self-appointed queen, ruling Silver Pines with a gavel and an iron fist. Her perfectly pressed blazers and clipboard of grievances were as much a part of her uniform as her smug smile. To Karen, the neighborhood's value wasn't measured in curb appeal or community spirit. It was about control. And Jake Rivera? He was a problem she intended to solve. From the moment he moved in, his quiet demeanor and soundproofed cabin grated on her nerves. How dare he exist so silently? It offended her sensibilities and, more importantly, gave her something to obsess over. The noise complaints started small but quickly escalated into outright harassment. Midnight drills, she claimed, filing reports that painted Jake as some sort of deranged military man reenacting war games in his backyard. When that didn't stick, she accused him of setting off illegal fireworks. Fireworks she herself had planted under cover of darkness. Each complaint came with fines and demands. Install approved noise-dampening gear, attend mandatory HOA meetings, or face eviction. Karen wielded her authority like a weapon, gaslighting the community into believing Jake was the issue. But what she didn't realize was that every battle she picked only sharpened Jake's resolve. And then came the petition. A forged masterpiece, complete with a neighbor's signature, Karen had lifted from an old HOA document. She waved it triumphantly at the next meeting, declaring Jake a menace who needed to be removed for the good of the neighborhood. The room fell silent as eyes turned toward him, but Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he studied Karen carefully, noting the flicker of unease behind her confident facade. For all her scheming, Karen had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the man she was dealing with. Jake wasn't just a retired Marine, he was a strategist, and now, thanks to her theatrics, he finally had the opening he needed to turn the tables. Karen's campaign of harassment quickly escalated from petty grievances to outright sabotage. Noise complaints flooded the HOA inbox, each one more absurd than the last. Midnight drills, she claimed, insisting Jake was reenacting military exercises in his backyard. When that didn't stick, she accused him of setting off illegal fireworks she herself had planted under cover of darkness. The fines piled up, each one accompanied by a condescending letter demanding he install HOA-approved noise-dampening equipment. But Jake wasn't fooled. He'd spent years honing his ability to detect deception, and every move Karen made only confirmed what he already knew. This wasn't about rules, it was personal. Then came the vandalism. One morning, Jake discovered his garden trampled, his tools scattered, and a bag of dog treats laced with peanut butter dumped near Rex's water bowl. His blood ran cold. Karen had done her homework. She must have learned about Rex's allergy training during her snooping. It was a calculated threat, disguised as a taunt. But Jake wasn't the kind of man to back down. Instead, he doubled down on his own strategy, fortifying his property with additional cameras and documenting every incident with meticulous precision. The breaking point came when Karen forged a neighbor's signature on a petition to evict him. She waved it triumphantly at the next HOA meeting, declaring Jake a menace who needed to be removed for the good of the neighborhood. The room fell silent as eyes turned toward him, but Jake didn't flinch. Instead, he stood calmly, pulling out his phone. "Funny you should mention signatures," he said, his voice steady. On the screen was footage of Karen sneaking onto his property, planting evidence, and even vandalizing his garden. The room erupted in murmurs as Karen's face turned pale. She'd underestimated the man she was dealing with, and now, she was about to pay for it. Karen's vendetta against Jake reached new heights, her actions growing bolder and more vindictive. It started with small acts of sabotage, his mailbox mysteriously dented, his garden trampled overnight, and even a bag of dog treats laced with peanut butter left temptingly close to Rex's water bowl. Jake recognized the calculated cruelty behind it all. Karen wasn't just trying to annoy him. She was testing his limits, probing for weaknesses. But Jake had spent years mastering patience and precision. Every move she made only tightened his focus. Then came the vandalism. One evening, as Jake worked on reinforcing his soundproofing system, he noticed something odd, a faint buzzing coming from outside. Investigating further, he discovered a Bluetooth speaker hidden under his porch, programmed to emit low-frequency vibrations at random intervals throughout the night. The source? A quick scan of his security footage revealed Karen sneaking onto his property in the dead of night. Her designer sneakers caked in mud. She thought she could gaslight him into believing the noise complaints were legitimate, but Jake saw through her ruse. This wasn't about maintaining neighborhood standards, it was personal. The final straw came when Karen forged a neighbor's signature on a petition demanding Jake's eviction. At the next HOA meeting, she waved the document triumphantly, declaring him a menace who needed to be removed for the good of the community. "This isn't just about noise," she announced, her voice dripping with faux concern. "It's about safety. Who knows what he's doing in that soundproofed fortress of his?" The room fell silent as eyes turned toward Jake. But instead of reacting with anger, he smiled grimly. On his phone, he queued up footage of Karen planting evidence, vandalizing his property, and sneaking around his yard. As the video played, Karen's smug expression crumbled. The tide was turning, and Jake was just getting started. Jake Rivera had spent years mastering the art of precision, and now it was time to put that skill to work. After discovering Karen's deepest fear, auditory hallucinations triggered by her ex-husband's suicide, he knew exactly how to dismantle her facade. The plan was simple yet devastating. Rig her home with hidden speakers, programmed to play sounds tailored to unravel her sanity. It wasn't just revenge, it was a symphony of retribution, conducted with military precision. Under the cover of darkness, Jake went to work. Using his expertise in soundproofing, he installed tiny, nearly undetectable speakers throughout Karen's property. Each device was synced to a remote system he controlled from his cabin. The sounds were subtle at first, a faint whisper here, the creak of floorboards there. But as the days passed, they grew more intrusive, muffled voices calling her name, the sound of breaking glass when no one was around, even the distant echo of her own panicked breathing. To anyone else, it would seem like harmless noises, but to Karen, they were a waking nightmare. The brilliance of Jake's plan lay in its psychological precision. He knew Karen wouldn't dare admit what she was hearing, not after years of gaslighting others into questioning their reality. Her paranoia would isolate her further, turning her own mind into her greatest enemy, and if she tried to blame him, he had already documented every interaction, every act of vandalism, and every fake complaint she'd filed against him. This wasn't just about making her regret targeting him, it was about exposing her for the manipulative fraud she truly was. The day of Karen's live-streamed HOA meeting arrived, and she was ready to deliver the final blow. Dressed in her sharpest blazer, she stood at the head of the room, her tablet queued with incriminating evidence against Jake. The camera lights blinked on as she began her presentation, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious issue in our community. A dangerous individual is disrupting our peace and jeopardizing property values." She gestured dramatically toward Jake, who sat calmly in the back row, arms crossed. As Karen launched into her tirade, the first whispers began, faint but unmistakable. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for the source. "It's those midnight drills," she said, her voice faltering slightly. "He's clearly unstable." But then came the sound of breaking glass, loud and jarring, though no one could pinpoint its origin. Karen froze, her composure cracking. "Stop it," she snapped, looking directly at Jake. The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "I'm not doing anything," Jake replied coolly, his tone measured. Then it happened again, a low, distorted voice calling her name. "Karen." It echoed through the room, picked up by her own microphone. Her face went pale as the footage Jake had rigged began to play over her live stream. The vandalism, the forged signatures, the late-night sabotage. The whispers grew louder, overlapping with her own smug declarations from past meetings. "This isn't real," she shrieked, clutching her head. But the damage was done. The livestream chat exploded with comments, and the room erupted in murmurs. Karen's mask of authority had shattered, leaving only a desperate, unhinged woman exposed for the fraud she truly was. Karen's downfall was as swift as it was humiliating. The live-streamed HOA meeting, where her own mic betrayed her hallucinations, became the talk of Silver Pines overnight. Neighbors who had once cowered under her tyrannical rule now whispered behind her back, or worse, openly mocked her. Her smug facade crumbled as people realized the extent of her manipulations. Anonymous tips flooded local blogs and forums, exposing Karen's history of weaponizing noise complaints, forging signatures, and vandalizing properties. Within days, she went from being the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood to infamous pariah. But Jake wasn't done yet. He released a carefully edited video titled Karma's Acoustic Revenge, stitching together footage of Karen's sabotage attempts, her meltdown at the HOA meeting, and even clips of her late-night prowling around his property. The video ended with a cheeky message: "Silence is golden, but justice? That's symphonic." It went viral within hours, racking up millions of views and sparking debates about accountability and entitlement. Meanwhile, Karen's reputation imploded. Her husband filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and possibly an aversion to public ridicule. She fled town shortly after, leaving behind her mansion, which was swiftly purchased by a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping veterans. For Jake, life in Silver Pines took on a new rhythm. His cabin became a retreat for veterans seeking peace and camaraderie, its soundproof walls offering sanctuary to those haunted by their own battles. On weekends, he hosted barbecues that brought the entire neighborhood together, complete with a playlist he jokingly called Karma's Greatest Hits. As for Karen, her name became a cautionary tale whispered among newcomers to the area. And every time someone asked Jake about the Bluetooth speaker mounted conspicuously above his mailbox, he'd just smile and say, "That? Oh, it's just a reminder that silence can speak louder than words."